Hello, America. I'm Doug Billings. This is The Simple Life. Thanks again for watching us. Over the last few days, we've been talking about the first principles, the first key principles that all of the Founding Fathers believed in and used as the basis for the creation of our republic. Today, the Founders' third principle. That one is stated as this: the most promising method of securing a virtuous and morally stable people is to elect virtuous leaders. I know I've heard a collective thud as about half of the audience just fell out of their chairs. Since when have we ever elected virtuous leaders? We used to do it all the time. Samuel Adams gave us a very hard fact about our survival as a free people when he said this: "But neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt." He was being serious, and he was talking about, I think, where we've arrived today. Are we morally corrupt as a society? Have we given up the fact of electing virtuous leaders? Thomas Jefferson coined a term called natural aristocracy. The founders knew, you see, human nature for what it is. It was a mix and is a mix of good and evil. Thomas Jefferson typified the founders' philosophy on social responsibility, and they strongly believed that the best citizens should accept major roles in public life. People with talent and demonstrated qualities of leadership should have the same sense of duty that George Washington did, that allowed himself to be called out of retirement 3 times to come and serve his country. Jefferson called Washington and those kinds of people natural aristocracy. They were our nation's natural aristocracy. And he said this aristocracy is based on virtue, talent, and patriotism, without which the nation could not survive. In total opposite to that, Jefferson said that there was an artificial aristocracy that dominated the elite people of Europe during the times of the kings. Those who got their high office from birth or wealth or their station in life, or because someone of a higher order gave them a favor. He said that that was not to be had in America. He wanted no part of it. He wrote this: "There is a natural aristocracy among men. The grounds of this are virtue and talents. There is also an artificial aristocracy founded on wealth and birth, and without either virtue or talent. For with these it would belong to the first class. The natural aristocracy I consider as the most precious gift of nature for the instruction, the trusts, and government of society." Jefferson thought that the worst thing that could happen to the new government would be the day that when the best and brightest people in our country refused to take on the tedious and I know sometimes unpleasant job of public office. But think about that. Aren't there people out there running in your local communities now who think they're entitled to a seat or an office? Does the name Kennedy ring a bell? In Kansas, in the 3rd District, Dennis Moore and his wife, they think they have a right to the seat of the people because of their last name? I'm telling you, the founders are rolling over in their graves, ladies and gentlemen. John Adams said the same thing in a different way when he said that politics was really a divine science. History has shown us that both Samuel Adams and his younger cousin John gave up their fortunes to serve in public office, and John Adams put great stress on the importance of studying for service in political life. You know, John Adams was never very popular as an individual, but the people knew that he could be trusted, and he was elected time and time again, finally becoming president of the United States. And in his later years, he wrote this: "I don't curse the day when I engaged in public affairs. I can't repent of anything I ever did conscientiously and from a sense of duty. I never engaged in public affairs for my own interest, pleasure, envy, jealousy, or ambition, or even the desire of fame. If any of these had been my motive, my conduct would have been very different. In every considerable transaction of my public life, I have invariably acted according to my best judgment, and I can look up to God for the sincerity of my intentions." You know, if we're astonished or blown away by the level of idealism that the Founding Fathers, like Adams and Jefferson, placed on their role of political politics and service, we'd be even more surprised, I think, by the fact that they had a huge desire and expressed an intent to prevent those offices of public service from becoming money traps or places where people could go to become wealthy. Imagine paying someone to become wealthy to govern. Benjamin Franklin couldn't take it, and he campaigned strongly against the huge compensation packages that were being offered over in Europe for positions of public service. He said that we should make public office an honor rather than a position of profit. And as he traveled Europe, he noticed that there was high competition for all of these public service jobs due to their salaries. And he thought, as I said, it's a big mistake, a serious mistake. In the early years of the United States, those kinds of positions of service to the community were granted by the community, a grateful city, state, or a nation. And people who took them up did so with very little or no compensation. Even when the annual salary of $25,000 was granted by the Constitution for the president, George Washington turned it down. Some would say that maybe his Mount Vernon plantation made him enough money to do that, and that may have been true. But what we don't say in the same sentence is that Mount Vernon was destroyed in the Revolutionary War, and Washington had not yet had the chance to build it back up to a level of productivity that would have provided him any living. He turned it down out of principle. And I agree that not everybody at that time could do such a thing, but it was considered the right thing to do when the circumstances presented themselves. Now think with me for a minute. Which political figure in today's political system, in either party, any party you can think of, would turn down their salary for service? No, I can't think of one either. So Franklin had a prophecy that was quite astounding, and you think if it's not coming true. He gave us a very huge insight into what we could expect if in the future generations we permitted the lure of high salaries to be associated with public office. Franklin saw that the possibility of profit in politics becoming the means by which an American monarchy could arise. Not that we may call it a monarchy, but that, how about this? Think of an executive, a president with a pen, signing what he calls an executive order. President Obama, every time he threatens to sign an executive order, which, by the way, bypasses the systems of checks and balances held by the Congress, becomes a monarch. He becomes a king. And that's exactly what him and the liberal left want. They don't say it, and they'll never say it or admit it, but they flaunt and yield and wield this executive order as a king would his scepter. The next time you hear the term, make sure that your ears perk up and listen to what's being spoken about. An executive order by the President of the United States should never be allowed. Franklin continued and said this at the Constitutional Congress. Listen to this, it's important. There is scarce a king in 100 who would not, if he could, follow the example of Pharaoh. First get all the people's money, and then all their lands, and then make them and their children servants forever. It's what Obama and the liberal left are doing. Get all of the people's money, health care, taxes, and then all of their lands, eminent domain, and then make them and their children servants forever through systems of entitlement. And oh, by the way, illegal aliens, come on in, because you know what? I'm going to use you. I'm going to give you free health care. I'm going to give you free access to our system. I'm going to let you vote because I need to sustain my kingdom. I need to sustain my kingdom. Franklin had it right, and I fear that his prophecies are coming true. What are we going to do about it? November is coming. So is there a formula? How do we produce virtuous leaders? We laugh when we say there are none. Well, how do we produce them? I don't think it's possible for any American to look back on the writings of our founding fathers and not be proud that these men came from the United States. These leaders who launched the first noble experiment for the freedom of mankind in modern times. But that begs the question, what's the formula? How do we create these people? How do we get these characteristics? The answer is found in their writings. Look to the writings of the Founding Fathers. As we can all see, they had careful study, they had a broad basic system of beliefs, and their churches and their families taught them what they needed to know. Throughout all of their writings, they project themselves as positive believers in a broad spectrum of fundamental precepts that they all called self-evident truths. That's the formula. We find people who believe these things. The beliefs themselves are remarkable, ladies and gentlemen, but the fact that every single one of them, of the Founding Fathers, every one, to a name, believed in them and took them on as his own, is even more remarkable. So thanks for joining me these past few days as we've gone back in time of antiquity to look at Cicero's writings and his definition of natural law, because that's where we had to go in order to understand fully what was in the heads of the founding fathers. Natural law. We had to look at the beginning. Now we're going to look at what the founders had to say about some of their better known principles. And ladies and gentlemen, our next show is going to blow you away. Their fourth principle, it's going to blow you away because we've been lied and misguided about this for the last 150 years. The fourth principle says, without religion, the government of a free people cannot be maintained. Think about it. And let me say it again. Without religion, the government of a free people cannot be maintained. That is what every one of our founding fathers held as their fourth basic principle. And we're going to talk about that next time on The Simple Life. Thanks for watching. I'm Doug Billings.